In trying to decide who or what we'd look into for our first post-spooky season Elden Lore, we went back to your comments to see what you wanted us to explore. Among the various enemies and NPCs, we noticed a number of people asking for one character in particular. In truth, we've already touched on her story when talking about White Mask Varhe and the Bloody Fingers, and we weren't sure there was much more to say. But after researching dialogue and paying attention to her attacks during our battle at the Second Church of Marika, we found threads that we believe flesh out her story. We are of course talking about the Drake Knight herself, Eleonora, the Violet Bloody Finger, and her relationship to Yura, the Bloody Finger Hunter. Like and subscribe if you've enjoyed any of our Elden Ring content. We look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. The story of Eleonora starts long before we can encounter her in the lands between. Our friend and ally, Yura, the Bloody Finger Hunter, is the first and only character we encounter who discusses her. After helping him defeat the Bloody Finger Ravenmount assassin, he tells us,
"I may not have much time. I'm dying to see you. Eleonora. Violet Bloody Finger. Yes, I've been tracking Eleonora for quite some time. She is the deadliest of all Bloody Fingers. She's felled many an old hand already, but in spite of her cessblood zealotry, Eleonora is a proud knight. If she comes for you, do not think twice. You must flee. There is no shame in self-preservation."
It is clear that Yura, the man who hunts Bloody Fingers and brings them to their demise, holds Eleonora in high regard. A curious thing for him to do given his disdain for cessblood. His armor may shed some light on these feelings. The Iron Casa tells us, the man once known as Yura kept a woman in the deepest reaches of his heart. The only woman we know Yura shows any fondness for is Eleonora, which leads us to believe at one point these two were allies. Or possibly something more. If we follow Yura's quest, we eventually meet him again at the Second Church of Marika, where he lays on the ground, beaten and bloodied. He says,
"It seems I am no match for you, but I've learned a thing or two myself. You see, I've sliced the finger off. Please. Eleonora, yield to the cessblood no longer. Do not stain the immaculacy of your sword, your flesh, your fire."
While Yura could not defeat his friend, it seems as though he did manage to cut off her bloody finger in an attempt to release her from the influence of Mohg, the Lord of Blood. Unfortunately, this does not stop her from invading our world to do battle with our Tarnished. It is in this fight that we get more clues to the truth of Eleonora's past. She wears the Drake Knight set, which is described as black iron armor worn by Drake Knights, features the spoils of a dragon catch as an emblem of pride as both dragon hunter and partaker of communion. From birth, Drake Knights speak not a word. They spend their lives pursuing the strength of dragons, for its sublime beauty and inspiration of awe. So Eleonora is a Drake Knight. Her goal in life was to hunt dragons for their hearts, and use them to attain strength through dragon communion. This can be seen in our battle with her as she uses Grail's Roar and Aghil's Flame incantations. Her role as a Drake Knight also speaks to her past with Yura. When we meet Yura at a fire by Aghil Lake, he warns us about the dragon up ahead. Should we choose to do battle with this dragon, we unlock unique dialogue related to dragon communion.
Beautiful work, felling that dragon, and as such, there's something you might like to know. The heart you brought back. It's used in dragon communion. If you should find yourself overcome by hunger for the heart, yearning for its strength, then seek the decrepit church on the little island off the western coast. You must not forget, though, those who partake in dragon communion will one day shed their humanity Their hunger for dragon, their yearning, only worsens until the floodgates burst, unleashing eternal torment. The strength of a mighty dragon. Magnificent, but deadly. It's no surprise that dragon communion is ruinous.
This is not only our first opportunity to learn about dragon communion, but it leads us to believe that Yura saw the effects of communion firsthand. Given that Eleonora never speaks, it's likely that Yura saw her downward spiral after engaging communion again and again. He watched her humanity leave her until her lust for power turned her toward another source. Eleonora's weapon of choice is a polearm, described as a twinned naginata found in the land of reeds. Her mastery of the sword was such that her onslaught was likened to a whirlwind, but now her legacy is stained by accursed blood. We believe that this weapon was a gift from Yura, as it seems unlikely a Drake Knight would originate from the land of reeds, and at one time, it likely was not stained in blood. What if Eleonora, in her lust for power after engaging in dragon communion one too many times, was approached by White Mask Vare and offered a new source of power, the blood of Mohg, infused into her weapon? All she need do is join his forces as a bloody finger. So it was that Eleonora became known as the Violet Bloody Finger, succumbing to the cessblood, and the man who loved her, Yura, began his hunt to bring her to justice. Another point of interest when it comes to Eleonora is the item she drops upon her defeat, the Purifying Crystal Tear. This tear is described as a crystal tear formed slowly over the age where the Erd Tree's bounty falls to the ground. It can be mixed in the flask of wondrous physic. The resulting concoction purifies the curse from Mohg, Lord of Blood's terrifying rite of blood. Perhaps Eleonora was not as far gone as we all thought, if she carried the key to resisting Mohg's curse with her at all times. Taking a look outside of the Lands Between, the name Eleonora rang a bell for me personally, and I couldn't put my finger on why. It turns out this name is actually the title to a short story by Edgar Allan Poe. In this story, both Eleonora and the narrator live in the Valley of the Many-Colored Grass, an idyllic paradise full of fragrant flowers, fantastic trees, and a river of silence. Eleonora also suffered from a sickness that would come to take her life, and while the rest of the story does not draw any parallels to our characters, we believe the first half does. Perhaps the River of Silence is the origin of the Drake Knight's vow of silence, and the sickness can be parallel to Eleonora's addiction to dragon communion. Also, the title of the Violet Bloody Finger seems to have no origin in-game, as she wears no violet armor and her eyes are distinctly blue. Perhaps this title comes from this quote from the story. The star-shaped flowers shrank into the stems of the trees and appeared no more. The tints of the green carpet faded, and one by one, the ruby-red asphodels withered away, and there sprang up, in place of them, 10 by 10, dark, eye-like violets that writhed uneasily and were ever encumbered with dew. As the narrator moved on from the loss of his love, the land changed and violets grew. Perhaps so too did Eleonora's bloodlust come from her pursuit of power, earning her the Violet moniker. Her naginata now encumbered with Mohg's dew, the blood of her victims. If we put all of these pieces and clues together, they paint a picture of two traveling companions, making their way through the Lands Between, battling dragons and sharing an adventure. Eleonora started her journey with purpose. As a Drake Knight, she always knew her goal was to slay dragons and take their strength as her own. Perhaps, in those early days, Yura was simply a swordsman who found someone worth fighting beside, and as his affection for her grew, so too did his concern for the toll dragon communion took on her. Eleonora, on the other hand, while she may have enjoyed the company of a friend with stories of a foreign land she would never come to see herself, ultimately knew her purpose was to gain strength by any means necessary, to continue fighting and killing dragons. This led her to the service of Mohg, her fall to the cessblood, and eventually, her murder of an old friend. We hope you enjoyed our interpretation of Eleonora and Yura's story. We're confident we found enough evidence to back up our ideas about their history together, but what do you think? Did we miss anything? Do you believe that these two once shared a strong bond? Or did Yura perhaps come to admire Eleonora from afar? We can't wait to hear your thoughts in the comments. Like and subscribe if you've enjoyed our lore content. We look forward to seeing you again for more Elden Lore.